videos talking about perpetual motion that people make, I get frustrated because they are definitely not seeing the full picture. And it's literally dumb. And it's literally just making sure my audio works and making sure I can see chat. I just saw this video talking about this clock. And you don't know what perpetual motion even means. You're always going to work with some form of external force. Show the fucking clock. This clock works by never needing to be rewound because it uses the change of temperature apparently of 6 degrees, as he mentions, to be able to make it so that the clock, I don't know how, but somehow, I guess the gas changes pressure, so that makes a motion that's enough to make the thing constantly have a change. And it's like, you realize that clock able to run for 100 years plus is genius. It's true perpetual motion. When people say a perpetual motion device needs to be a closed system in and of itself, they're stupid. You're never going to be without some other part of the system making it work. It's like you're either using gravity or magnetism or heat, or in this case, air, the pressure of the gases inside of the thing making a motion. And it's similar to that bird that constantly dips. That's perpetual motion in and of itself. The thing is, if you want to think of it as perpetual motion, you have to also consider the fact that it will need the external parts in order to run. Gravity, heat, radiation of some sort from an outside source perhaps. But as we get more and more complicated about it, well, all we have to do is make it so that it starts making energy, not just running a clock. And that's not even hard to do. All we have to do is make it so that the energy is collected by a very sensitive capacitor, and then suddenly we're also generating power, not just running the clock. And if you double the amount of functions that normally are put in place to make the clock run, suddenly you have twice as much potential power. Literally 2 of these, or a more efficient version, can be used to make it so that we have all sorts of power, literally just by the change of temperature between the day and the night. That's all it takes. Happens all the time. If you put these literally everywhere, and then all you need to do to make it so that the clock continuously runs correctly is just maintain the rest of it, well, then all you have to think about is, well, what if we made a lot of these? And what if all of those all contribute towards the making of the heat used in the function of the device? Literally, that clock can become perpetual motion if you think bigger. Literally no reason why not. You have free energy from that. It's just running based off of the simple thing. And it's similar. I mentioned like how you can have Stirling engines in space. Do you know how that works? Because it's real simple. Out in space, temperature is eking out all the time from whatever is making temperature. But the moment that you get the Stirling engine running, the cold is on the outside, out in space. The warm is on the inside of the spaceship or space station and satellite, what have you. And the amount of heat made inside the space station, or whatever it is, can be enough to make the Stirling engine start working. The cold constantly is making the gradient necessary for the constant supply power. It simply works. Put a Stirling engine in space, you don't even need gas, you don't need anything else. It's just the cold of outer space. And you can have it so that, like, the air or whatever that is flowing through the system is easily going to just keep on expanding, compressing. You can make it so that it has certain designs like maybe electromagnetic parts or whatever else. It's possible to have all, it's possible to have all sorts of stuff be able to be used to make all these different changes that make it go from not being a perpetual motion machine to becoming a perpetual motion machine. The sheer fact that that clock is capable of running almost 100% because it was made way long ago. Now we have the technology to add those parts to make it so that it runs continuously. Like the amount of power necessary to make it so that there is a compensator for the amount of heat or the amount of cold that it would need can easily have that energy generated from man, I hate it when I have to see these videos. It's like yeah, you know the solution, you know the problems, just try implementing it. And my obvious statement is that, well, clearly, what if they just did all those things that I'm talking about and still the problem with perpetual motion is your attitude of it. Just the fact that it doesn't run on its own. It has to use gravity, it has to use the heat of the atmosphere, or it has to use sunlight. or it has to use whatever else. You're missing the point. And you're forgetting that if there's ever a way to make it so that, well, all you have to do with this kind of heat or cold is that you could add on extra things like a magnifying glass to make it so that the light from the sun ends up heating it up a little bit more if needed, or not if not needed. And on a cloudy day, it can have extra heating, and the energy could have been generated throughout the year to be put towards that. It can become become self-perpetuated motion eventually, but the point is you're still utilizing air pressure, gravity. You're still using something. So you can't discount that and also and just use that as your excuse to say it's not perpetual motion, it's using gravity. It's using air pressure. Of course it is. There's no reason to say that that's not a valid perpetual motion. The accuracy of the device is just based off of its iteration. And you could be working on stuff like this for a while. If you want, you can use neodymium magnets for stuff. There is a constant force from magnets, and then all you have to do is have a device that charges the magnets every so often, and have the device that the magnets are powering make enough power in the charging of it so that it can not only give power to something but also recharge those neodymium magnets. And the thing is, the neodymium magnets are not going to run out of power for another 100 years. And they're only going to lose like 10% after that time. So at that point, it is perpetual motion. It's self-sustaining. And it's ridiculous anyone ever says that neodymium magnets can't be used to make perpetual motion, because they can be. If they can make enough power to near the time when at the time when, if the amount of magnetic force becomes so little in the device that it actually stops from running, at that point you're able, or before that point, you're able to recharge the magnets, right? Or while it's running, you can even have, here's the thing, have two devices. One of them is running and the magnets are fresh, and the other is running and it has the ability to recharge for that amount of time. So you technically have continuous, renewable, unexhaustible, will work forever and will work always device. You don't ever make one machine, you make two. One is redundancy, and then you have the ability to make the power, and it regenerates the batteries, it runs forever, it creates the work that you want it to make, and it's done. Simple. You're still using gravity. And saying that use of gravity means it's not perpetual motion is scientifically just stupid. There's no avoiding gravity. the moment that you have to start working on making the sun be consistent and making the gravitational forces on the planet be consistent, you're working on a magnitude of power that's way more than these devices are meant for. But these devices lasting for 100 years without losing much power at all, or like this clock or like the other device capable of running for 200 years, and you call it not perpetual motion, it has a battery or something. You can have batteries. You can have a battery is nothing more than ion flow transfer units. And if you can have those ions be able to move and not have it be depleting, you have perpetual motion. The question is, do you ever like plug it in later on? Do you ever need to use external powers or whatever else? Does it use some weird thing with the atmosphere or whatnot? Rule all of that out, know all these different variables, make the devices, and then you have the answer. And it is real. It's not a farce to have perpetual motion. An electric dam is the thing that powers pretty much everything that we have next to, except for like the gas generators and the nuclear generators. And if we only worked with the amount of power that the hydroelectric dams produced, that's perpetual motion. And we're actually able to do so much more than what they produce. It's ridiculous. And then you have to also look at atomic material. Atoms, like carbon and whatever else, every single material in the universe, as long as it has the same electrons and doesn't have them just stripped away or something, and doesn't break down, this is the same material that has existed throughout the entirety of the universe, billions of years. The only way that they can do that and have electrons orbiting around the atom and whatever else, the constant actions that are happening on the atomic level, that is perpetual motion in and of itself. The fact that you exist is perpetual motion. And then we end up with all the other developments that we've been able to do with all the excess energy that we are able to make. Not from just breaking apart or fusing them together, but just having you, yourself, this entire universe exist is a perpetual motion machine. And what makes those atoms constantly run? It's not within themselves. There's energies throughout the universe. Electromagnetism is everywhere. It flows everything. The force binds all of us. It binds galaxies together. It's the reason why we have the outer edges of a galaxy be able to move faster than we normally could predict, because all the electromagnetic fields around planets, around stars, extend, and the wake of their motion extends. And it's not just the mass of the black hole in the center that's holding everything together. There's also the arms that are held together by the electromagnetic forces. It's silly. It's just too silly. It's just too dumb. It's annoying to hear people say there's no such thing as perpetual motion. Yeah, you've stopped taking patents for it, but that doesn't mean it can't be made. And maybe your definition is too rigid and you don't understand what perpetual motion actually is. If it all has to be inside the closed system and be perpetual, then all we need to do is, like I said, run everything so that we can recharge the power of the sun. Start making matter by forcing quarks to come into existence, by pulling them apart. You can have a machine create metric tons of matter by just pulling quarks apart at at a extreme high frequency. You can have it happen every second. And then if you have enough quarks and enough fusion functioning, the correct kind, the real kind of fusion, you can make those quarks turn into hydrogen. You can make those turn into whatever else you want to make. And then suddenly you're just building matter. Where'd that asteroid come from? That's a man-made asteroid. It didn't come from anywhere. It's not from the planet. It's not from another planet or a dying star. It's something we crafted out of the ether which is around us. An energy that we owe our entire lives to. And there's no difference between using that to make quarks do their thing, that generate more quarks, and then if you separate them and keep on, then you can have quarks just constantly be regenerating. If you spread it out far enough, it'll stay continuously running. Because as you all know, energy being generated in a certain area, the electromagnetic fields start to be inefficient. That's why in a hydroelectric dam, the generators are spaced out. You could space them all together if you wanted to, but it's better if you space them out. Static electric limit. But whatever. Keep thinking that it doesn't exist. It does. If you like this video, you can check out the other Science Me playlist where I talk about all sorts of things science. The reason I believe perpetual motion can definitely become a thing, besides that clock being like such an obvious choice. I mean, if you use the atmosphere, if you have those gases and the pressure of how they are bundled together in the heat of the day, pushing everything around, and then at the cold of the night, it all compresses. Yeah, that's just an obvious. You can just use that forever. You can maximize that to power the entire planet if you wanted to. Why haven't you? And who cares if you call it actual perpetual motion? It fucking works. Use it. Meanwhile,